Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman Schiff, so you just heard the issue of pardons. He is not ruling out that the president could issue pardons to key figures in this investigation. Would that put an end to this if the president suddenly issued blanket pardons to the key figures?
It wouldn't put an end to it. Obviously, it'd be deeply disturbing, and I think the impression certainly the country would get from that is the president was trying to shield people from liability for telling the truth about what happened in the Russia investigation or Russian contacts. But what I take away from his discussion with you is two things, 2 points he wants to make. First, the president didn't know, and second, even if he did, there's no crime here. Now, to believe that, though, we have to rely on two things. We have to rely on Don Jr.'s representation of what happened in that meeting, and we've already seen many times we can't rely on that because, of course, he first said no such meeting ever happened, and then he said the meeting was about adoptions, and then he admitted the meeting was about getting information on Hillary Clinton, and that he wasn't forthcoming about who was in the meeting. So we can't accept anything Don Jr. says, and, of course, we can't accept much the president says about this either because he has a similar record of not being forthcoming when it comes to Russia. And indeed, if you look at the president's statements around this time, he announces a speech he's going to give where he's going to give the dirt on Hillary Clinton that he then cancels. Now, that would corroborate that Don Jr. didn't get the information he was hoping for, but of course it contradicts the idea that he was unaware.
But you also heard him say several times the president is not under investigation. Is that true?
I can't comment on who Bob Mueller may be looking at, but clearly we want to, in the congressional committees, determine just what the Russians did, who was knowing of it, who was participating in it. And, of course, the president very publicly encouraged Russia to do exactly what Don Jr. was encouraging Russia to do privately, that is, give us the dirt on Hillary Clinton. And every time there was dirt released in the form of stolen emails, the president applauded it very publicly. So the question that we've had, among others, is, was the campaign doing privately what the president was urging publicly? And here you have now evidence in black and white that, yes, the campaign was encouraging the Russians to give them dirt. And the fact that this was done through intermediaries is just how the Russians operate.
But if we look at this Trump Tower meeting, and certainly it's problematic and the shifting explanations of it are problematic, but the bottom line, is there any evidence whatsoever tying this meeting or that Russian lawyer to the centerpiece of this Russian influence campaign, which was the hack of the DNC, the hack of the Clinton campaign emails? Is there anything whatsoever tying this meeting to that activity by the Russians?
Well, you know, it's certainly tied in the sense that this is about as clear evidence you could find of intent by the campaign to collude with the Russians, to get useful information from the Russians.
A willingness to accept, we see from the president's son. But we don't see anything...
More than that, though. A willingness not only to accept, but to indicate to Russia what the best timing was. Of course, Don Jr. says in the emails, late summer. And what do we know about late summer? That's when the Russians start dumping this information. To accept the attorney's representation that no crime was committed here, you have to accept Don Jr.'s representations. If they went into that meeting, and here they want something, they want information from the Russians want something, they want repeal of the sanctions law, the Magnitsky law. If there's any kind of an understanding that comes out of that meeting, you get us the dirt, you start leaking dirt on Hillary Clinton, and we will look favorably on repealing the Magnitsky Act. That is a very serious crime.
Okay, you've heard they've also pointed to this this issue with the Democratic Party and the Ukrainian embassy. This comes from a story in Politico that ran in January. The headline: Ukrainian efforts to sabotage Trump backfire. And I want to read from the article. A Ukrainian-American operative who was consulting for the DNC met with top officials in the Ukrainian embassy in Washington in an effort to expose ties between Trump, top campaign aide Paul Manafort, and Russia. The Ukrainian efforts had an impact in this race, helping force Manafort's resignation and advancing the narrative that the Trump campaign was deeply connected to Ukraine's foe to the east, Russia. So let me ask you, I understand Hillary Clinton lost, and I understand this effort was not as elaborate as the Russian effort, but was it acceptable, or would it have been acceptable for the Democrats to accept help from the Ukrainian government in this campaign?
No, it would be appropriate for the Democrats to accept help from the Ukrainian government. But I think if you look at the Politico article, and we're talking about just a single article here, if you accept all the facts in the article, the scale of what the Russians did is not comparable to anything in that article. If it were, the comparable analogy would be that the Ukrainian president directed the Ukrainian intelligence agencies to steal, to hack Donald Trump's campaign, steal emails, publish them, directed a social media army to influence the election, and sat down, its representatives sat down with Chelsea Clinton and John Podesta, in which they indicated they wanted the dirt on Donald Trump. There's no suggestion anything of that magnitude.
So the scale is different, acknowledge that, but this is problematic. This Ukrainian meeting is problematic in your eyes.
Well, it would be problematic to get any kind of support from a foreign government. But again, I think to compare the two is a bit like comparing bank robbery with writing a check with insufficient funds. Both appropriate money from the bank improperly, but a very different degree of seriousness and involvement, in this case, by a foreign government.
So the most recent person to appear before your committee is a former Trump advisor named Michael Caputo. He's going to be on the roundtable in a bit. After he spoke with your committee for several hours, he called it collusion delusion. His lawyer, who was present, said the questions devolved into a fishing expedition. Are you on a fishing expedition here when you bring in somebody like Michael Caputo?
And I think the interview, he was very cooperative, which we appreciate. But he's a PR guy. This is PR, I think, aligned with the Trump campaign. And, of course, he got an attaboy from the president about this. If we had said 10 days ago, Jonathan, that we were looking for evidence that top Trump campaign people met with representatives of the Russian government to get dirt on Hillary Clinton, they would have said there's no such thing. That's a fishing expedition. You're looking for something that doesn't exist. Now, of course, we know that does exist. That did take place. So they can call it a fishing expedition. They can call it a witch hunt. It's all an aligned message with the White House. But nonetheless, real evidence is coming forward that just can't be ignored.
So when we talk about this Trump Tower meeting, and obviously we've learned that there were more people there. It wasn't just the Russian lawyer. We have this Russian-American lobbyist. What's the significance of his presence, or is there a significance of his presence at this meeting?
I think it's very significant. Here you have two people now aligned with the Russian government, and a third translator that we don't know the identity of the person, whether that person also came out from Moscow, whether that person might have connections to Russian intelligence. But here you have someone in this lobbyist who has a history, at least according to court litigation, of being involved in getting information potentially in illicit ways from Russian hackers, damaging information about a rival company. You have someone who, if you look at the way the Russian government intelligence agencies work, the Russian government has a priority. In this case, it's getting rid of the Magnitsky Act. They employ the use of oligarchs. Oligarchs put money into a phony organization. The phony organization hires this Veselnitskaya as well as the Russian lobbyist to do their work. And they sit down at a meeting and offer dirt. And what do they want in exchange? They want repeal of this law that Putin hates. So it's very significant.
Which, by the way, hasn't happened.
It hasn't. It hasn't.
There's no indication.
And Congress is going to make sure it doesn't happen.